global growth of buy now, pay later providers continues, with New Zealand's own Laybuy announcing plans to expand its operations in the UK and eventually the US. The company's co-founder Gary Rohloff says the UK and Europe are both untapped markets, and Laybuy sees it as a good chance to expand its operations. Buy now, pay later providers allow consumers to purchase and obtain products and services in-store or online immediately, but pay for the purchase over time. And while there are no interest charges, there are often penalty fees for late payments. Companies advertise their websites, which retailers they are working with for their particular buy now, pay later services. So hi Gary, how's it going?
Hi Steve, I'm great, thanks.
Yep.
And thanks for the chance to have a chat.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
So you're calling me from London?
Yes,
Yep.
yes. We've relocated to London. My wife, who's my business partner, and our youngest son and I have relocated over here to drive the growth in UK Europe.
Yep. Okay. So when was Laybuy officially launched in New Zealand? That was.
The first transactions went through around the 19th of May 2017.
Yep.
2 years ago, almost to the day.
Okay. And so I know other providers in the industry have said they aren't providing credit. Now, could you honestly say you aren't providing a form of credit?
Oh no, you know, any of the traditional Laybuy models that I'm old enough to remember were a function of credit extension, and that is no different from what we're doing. The most important element is we're always interest free. We never charge interest to the consumer, and I think that's not dissimilar to the Laybuy traditional that I used to buy my Levi's on when I couldn't afford them.
And so when did you officially launch Laybuy in the UK?
We started trading over here in October last year, and the first merchants we had on board were the Australian and New Zealand merchants that we have who ship into the UK, because our platform's currency agnostic, so we can provide access to the UK for those merchants. And then we had an official launch, I suppose, with a really big named retailer up here called Foot Asylum in February. And that was a big named retailer in the UK.
Okay, so how many transactions would you be looking at in the time you've been in the UK since October last year? How many transactions would have you processed?
I can tell you exactly, actually, if you just bear with me, because we have real-time reporting, as you might expect. So the transaction volume that we've done is in excess of £1.5 million.
Okay, and has the growth been quite rapid, has it?
Yeah, that's been very, very rapid indeed.
Yeah. Okay, and so when do you expect to start? You look now also looking at expanding into the US market, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, our platform, the reliance on credit scoring is very important for us. And that's a function of the affordability for the consumer, because we are fully integrated with a global credit bureau called Experian. And it's just a function of being able to score in the jurisdictions we want to grow into that determines our rollout plan. So we are now working on the availability of credit scoring in the US and Europe with Experian.
Okay, and so that's what I was going to mention. So, do you see major differences as well in terms of the regulation of the industry? Because obviously, like here in New Zealand, I know looking at the New Zealand government, they said while they haven't included buy now, pay later providers under the changes to the Credit Contracts and Consumer Finance Act, they said they want to be able to have the ability to, at a later date, if they see the need to, bring buy now, pay later providers under those regulations. So. What are your thoughts on the regulation of the industry? Is it different in the UK?
No, it's not different here, Steve. My background prior to Laybuy was in retail, but when I started my career, I was in banking and finance. So I've got a pretty good understanding of what the banking requirement law is. And what we did and why we have an independent credit scoring bureau involved in our business is to maintain independence. And that is what I think is critical with any regulatory regime, is there has to be an independent body credit scoring and affordability checking. And we will need as an industry to align to that and ensure we're leaving a footprint on the credit file so that other lenders, we are behaving in line with other lenders around extension of credit.
Okay, so you're not trying to distance yourself okay, you're not trying to distance yourself from other credit providers. You're saying you are part of the wider credit industry.
Well, I think you have to be, because we're relying on their input to make value judgments on a person's ability to repay or the affordability of the credit.
Yeah.
And therefore you have to align to the industry and be a part of that. So, look, regulation is not something that anyone should fear. It's something that you should embrace because you have a chance to be a part of it. So.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And so, what do you think of the rapid growth of the Australian company Afterpay?
Stunning.
Yeah. Were they a company you've been trying to emulate, or?
No, look, the idea of this Laybuy concept was something we tried to do back in the early 2000s when I was running a company called Laybuy in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And so this idea had been on my mind since early 2003. Yeah. What we couldn't do back then when we were looking at it for Laybuy was credit check digitally. It was all paper-based and people-based, so the economics were too tough to make work.
Yeah.
I'd watched what was happening here in the UK, in the US, and in Australia, and thought, well, I'm at my stage in the career, I don't want to die wondering. So that's why we do. Afterpay is an outstanding performer. There's no question of that.
Yeah. Okay. And so, do you have any plans to publicly list the company in New Zealand or in the UK?
Look, that's not something we have considered in the short term. Steve, we raised equity at the end of last year via a New Zealand-based private equity company called Pioneer Capital.
Yep.
They are an outstanding equity partner for us.
Yep.
They are supportive of our global growth. We have a dream of creating a ubiquitous global brand, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yep.
And so, look, listing is not on our radar in the near term, but you never say never, do you?
Yep.
Just see what happens.
Okay, so like globally now as we speak, how much would you say what's the company's turnover now?
Oh, look, at a retail line, which is the best way to describe what we are transacting at retail, we're doing just over $180 million in New Zealand dollars.
Okay. And so the other thing I was going to ask you about was obviously you're looking at expanding Europe as part of, I saw some of the reports where they mentioned Europe and UK. So is Brexit going to have any impact on your plans to expand into Europe, or?
Look, if anyone could answer that conundrum, we'd have. I don't think anyone knows what Brexit means right now. Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, you can only deal with what you see in front of you. We are not concerned about what happens with or without Brexit. We've just got to keep doing what we're doing, and the access into Europe's there.
Yeah. Okay. And so, yeah, what else have you got planned for the company in the coming months for 2019?
Oh, look, we've got a couple of the UK's largest retailers in the final stages of our negotiations with them, so we'll be launching with those people shortly, and those names are very, very familiar names in this market.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting for us.
Yeah.
We're busy hiring people over here so that we can support our customers. Yeah. The most important thing for us is the customer service we provide, both to the consumer and the merchant. So it's just about scaling.
Really. I mean, compared to the other companies in the market, is that still your main source of revenue, the retailers? Are they still?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Look, you touched on it earlier, the late payment fee. Late payment fees are necessary in any credit extension program as an incentive to people to actually pay. Yeah. We're not reliant on late payment fees. We prefer people to pay, because if someone doesn't pay us, we suspend their account straight away, so they can't get into a debt spiral. Yeah. That's the last thing we want to be creating. And let's face it, Steve, if you don't have enough money in your account to pay the instalment that is due, you're most unlikely to have enough money in the account to pay a late payment fee that's automated as well. So, it's an incentive to pay.
Yeah, because I read the report by the Australian Securities and Exchange Commission looking at the buy now, pay later providers, and they did mention that the majority of the revenue coming into the companies was coming from the retailers, so it's retailer driven.
Oh yeah, look, and even today, if you've got a phone plan with any of the major telephone providers and you don't pay your bill, they hit you with a late fee. Yeah. You know, it's not an uncommon practice. I don't know why that people wouldn't think there has to be some incentive to pay on time. It's very normal, very normal.
Yeah. So do you just think it's a case of like we're actually seeing a lot with different forms of technology, and as the march of technology happens, we're seeing cases of whether it's regulation of Uber or whether it's the regulation of social media platforms. Do you think it's the same sort of thing with the buy now, pay later providers, where the regulators are playing catch up to technology?
Oh, look, I don't know if they're playing catch up. I think it's just a function of the fact that in today's world, millennials particularly, and those in Generation Z, I think the marketing guys call it, they don't like credit cards. They've seen the downside of credit cards and the high interest rates that are charged. And our two sons are in our business. They're 26 and 22. They give us very, very frank feedback on what the millennial market likes, which is great.
Is that your target market, the millennials?
No, not necessarily, but they are a growing part of our community who is purchasing at retail, and they don't like credit cards. So I feel that, I'm old enough to remember when we were still writing out checks and everyone said Visa and MasterCard would never take off,
So what would you say is the demographic profile of your average customer?
We have two bubbles in our database. We have a bubble between 22 and 32 years of age, and then we have another bubble at 45 plus. So the 22 to 32 is pretty easy to understand.
Yeah.
The 45 plus comes down to two groups. They are families who are looking to afford or find a way of budgeting for products that they need. Yeah. And the others are the savvy shoppers who see this as a very, very smart way to shop because it's interest free. We've got some great stories from a couple of families that spring to mind. Wrote in and said to us, hey, look, it's the first time I can afford to buy my kids a raincoat at the start of the winter because I couldn't afford $120 for two raincoats, but I can afford $20 a week for 6 weeks. So that's pretty cool. And we had a dad come in and, you and I both know what the rugby season starts for kids in about February. That's right after Christmas and back to school. It's a time when parents are pretty strapped for cash. And he said, look, it's great. I can buy the kids their rugby boots at the start of the season so that they can have their new boots like all the other boys. And I can just pay it off interest-free over 6 weeks. So I think there's a lot of talk about, this is a bad thing. It's actually a great thing for people to be able to budget effectively. And that's the thing that I think most people miss.
Okay, thanks very much for your time, Gary. It's good speaking.